relationship, no. I would love to tell you that, the 11 felonies that I racked up during my drinking career was enough to get me here, but that wasn't enough. Ending up on life support, all that outside stuff, none of that's enough to get me in the rooms. And if none of that has happened to you, it really doesn't matter. Not a single one of those things make me an alcoholic. They help me, identify further down the road how powerless and unmanageable my life is. But the truth is, I'm an alcoholic because when I start drinking, I have a physical allergy to alcohol. I react differently than my fellows. I can't have one, right? It demands more and it demands more and it demands more. But more importantly, I have a disease that centers in my mind. And that, I have a brain that will always take me back to a drink despite the consequences, or it'll tell me a different story about it. I'll swim in a delusion that this time I'll handle it like normal people, and here's how. And I continue to play this out over and over and over again. And the reason I believe that I experienced that abnormal reaction in my brain, that mental blank spot, is because the pain of sobriety and the pain of the disconnect between me, you, and God is so great that I suffer so badly sober that I'll do anything to get relief from that. That at some point, I'll need relief so badly it won't matter what the consequences will look like. And that's for me what I actually suffer from. The only reason I even talk about the outside consequences is to illustrate just how powerful alcohol did become for me. That there was no threat, that there was no consequence, there was no human power great enough. No frothy emotional appeal, nothing great enough to get me to stop. If you told me that you were going to lock me up, I'm like, all right, well, catch me when you can. Now, I had warrants out on me for years. Or if you tell me that you're going to take my babies away from me, I'm like, you know what? They're better off without me. And that's the deep down truth. And frankly, I didn't really want that responsibility. I love my children, but I don't want to take care of them because I'm inherently selfish. I want to drink. I want to drink. And if you tell me I'm going to die, I'm like, well, can we hurry it up? Because life is too painful. I don't want to deal with this. It's not even a threat anymore. That would be a gift. And this is how I suffer for years and years until finally on May 2nd of 2012, I experienced something that I had never experienced before. It was it was a bottom that didn't really look like a bottom on the outside. I mean, it was kind of a mess, but it wasn't the worst bottom I'd ever experienced. I had some stuff. I had a roof over my head, a job, a car, some money in my pocket. I wasn't as far down as I had gone in the past, but something was happening inside of me that had never happened before. Like I was experiencing this, I don't know, the book refers to this as this self-imposed crisis I could no longer postpone or evade. And I could never find words as beautiful as that to describe what was happening. A self-imposed crisis I could no longer postpone or evade. And I remember getting on this highway, driving to go get a drink in the middle of the night, and I have this overwhelming and overpowering desire to turn that wheel around and just go home and stop doing all the garbage I'm doing, stop lying, cheating, stealing, doing all that, stop hurting my family and my babies. And no matter how badly I want to turn that wheel around, I can't physically do it. The wheel will not turn. I'm like on my way to get the drink and I can't stop myself. And in that moment, I knew powerlessness like I had never known before. You would always try to explain that first step to me, but it wasn't until I experienced that first step, experienced true powerlessness, that I could truly concede to my innermost self what the problem was. And in that moment, I did something that I had never done prior to that. I'm not saying I haven't prayed. I've prayed my whole life. I have a transactional God, and I have this idea that God is like Santa Claus or a genie. Like, here's my will, God. Perform this for me. And when the power doesn't follow through with my will, I assume God doesn't exist and God doesn't care about me. And I throw the baby out with the bathwater, and I think I've abandoned the God idea entirely. But in that moment of desperation, I cry out to a power that I don't believe in and I don't think cares about me. And I have one simple prayer: dear God, please effing kill me or stop me. Like screaming, crying, pounding the steering wheel, just kill me or stop me. Because I can't do this anymore and I don't know what else to do. And 12 hours later, law enforcement physically separated me from alcohol for the last time. I didn't know it was going to be the last time. And, I don't know how God works in your life. God has no problem showing up in mine as law enforcement. But, the truth is like, I'm not necessarily believing a conception of this like deity in the sky manipulating all of us. I believe we all kind of have a certain will and we're all connected. We have that fundamental idea of God deep down within all of us. But what I do believe is what it says in the book, that God does not make too hard of terms for those who seek him. And in that moment, when I desperately sought a power to intervene in my life, there were doorways and pathways that opened up to provide me what I needed to be separated from the thing that was killing me. Because that's what I so desperately needed. And it would be really cool to tell you that, like, I experienced this gift of desperation and all of a sudden I had a psychic change and everything got better. That's absolutely not what happened. Within a day or so, I woke up experiencing the, remarkable recuperative power of the alcoholic ego. And I'm like, oh, this isn't what I wanted. I wanted a detox. I didn't want a jail cell. Like, I didn't want these consequences. I didn't want all this garbage. And so I try to manipulate and control my way out of the situation, and it doesn't work. So what happens is I'm sent to state prison and I'm physically separated from alcohol for 18 months. And the only thing that happens to me during that 18-month period is that in hindsight, I have empirical evidence that what I suffer from does not come in a bottle. It comes when you take it away from me. No, I'm not saying alcohol is not a problem. I would never dismiss alcohol like that because once alcohol is in my system, it is absolutely 100% a problem, right? But what happens when I'm separated from alcohol? Because if all I have is a physical allergy to alcohol, I would have stopped after the first consequence. That's it. One bad thing happens to me. I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore. It's not worth it. It's not worth the price I pay. The problem is it becomes worth it because it gives me the relief of the pain of sobriety, sobers my problem. That's when everything arises, when I don't have alcohol anymore, when I'm driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pity. When I start stepping on the toes of my fellows from inside the walls of a prison cell, you could ask my family about what a riot it was to get phone calls from me on the phone account they pay for about, this is what you need to do for me, right? Or the long apology letters, some of the amends letters I wrote home that my sister so lovingly handed back to me at 5 years sober. But the insanity of me writing long apology letters home about, I'm so sorry, but if you were better parents or siblings, I wouldn't be here. And P.S. send me money. That's all I've got. This is me. And so actually I'll take that back. That's me driven by self and fear. That's the ego driving everything. And so after I get out, I still have grand ideas of how I'm going to run my life, and within a day or so they're all ripped out from underneath me and I'm left with nothing and I'm in so much pain and I haven't had a drink in 18 months and I don't know what the hell is wrong with me. Because if this is sober, like I frankly don't want any part of this. So I'm curled up in the ball in a fetal position, crying out again to a power that I don't believe in and I really don't think cares about me. But God, you got to help me. You got to show me what to do because I can't do this. I have this moment where I realize, like, I know what's going to happen. I know if I walk out that door and drink again, I'm going to die. Like, fear sobered me up. Like, I think Bill says it in his story. Like, fear can keep us sober for a little bit. Like, I had that brief window where I was just afraid to drink again. And in that moment, like, I'm crying out to this power, like, what do I do in the moment of this fear? Because I don't know another way and I don't know how long I can take this sober state. I really don't. And so what happened is like I have powers greater than myself, like recovery house managers who tell me I have to go to a meeting. And I walk up the steps in my old home group, the Greater Northeast Group of Alcoholics Anonymous, where I got sober, and I walk in that room and something was different because when I walked in the room this time, all those happy, joyous, and free people, they're not strangers anymore. These are my people. These are my friends. These are people I drank with, people I knew were just like me, but there was something different because they were free, they were lit up, they were sober, walking around with that book and a smile, helping people, talking about God openly. And like I knew they didn't have the power to do that. Now, I'm not totally convinced at this point that this is going to work for me. In fact, I think my first come to believe moment was like I came to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as I'd been living it. Like I knew I couldn't continue the way I was going anymore. And I knew like this was working for you guys, so maybe I'll try it. That's basically all I've got. And I don't have a white light, Bill W.'s story about a cathedral. I've got like really painful, awkward, embarrassing moments in my going through my steps, that first third step experience where I'm making the most important decision I've ever made in my entire life, which is to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. I miss this moment because I'm too busy thinking about what you think of me, about the other women in the room who were watching me hold hands and kneeling on the floor with my sponsor. Like, yikes, like this is embarrassing. I don't even know the words I'm saying. But when I get up from that prayer and I start writing and I get as honest I put pen to paper, as honest as I was capable of being at that point in my life, something changed. Something started to change little by little. I can't I can't say that I walk away from that first fifth stop like feeling the nearness of my creator and being able to look the world in the eye. I felt profoundly worse if I'm being honest. Because like my sponsor sets me up. She's like, "Well, you get to write a list of all the people you're angry at." I'm like, "Oh, great. I have a great story for you because I'm so angry at everybody. And I come in here and all I have are those first two columns, you and what you did to me, and I could talk for hours and hours and hours about that." I never I never even considered that there were other things. I never even considered that third column of like how terrified I am that I walk around with this fear because you've threatened my self-esteem and my pride and my security. I never even looked at that stuff. Or that fourth column, how I react, how I retaliate, how I hurt people. And so as I do this, as I sit with this sponsor and I look at this from a new angle, I start to see something I don't see, I don't feel the lightness come in just yet, but I start to see the truth. I start to experience that shift in perception. And like for instance, my mom got a page to herself. And I don't know if, about any of you, but my mom made me an alcoholic. That's what I come in here convinced of. Like, but as I sit there, like, here's long story short, like when I was younger, these three men did something absolutely horrible to me. And my mom's reaction was like, how could you be so stupid? And how could you put yourself in that position? And from that moment on, it was my goal in life to make her suffer. That was it. Like, I'm going to punish her. She's going to suffer. That's it. But as I go through these columns and with this sponsor and I get to that fourth column, I not only see how selfish and self-seeking and dishonest and frightened I've been, I see that I took this one decision that my mother made, probably coming out of her own fear, this one mistake she made, and I've allowed it to blind me to every beautiful thing she's ever done for me, my entire life, and all the unconditional love she always showed me. And this is the truth of my resentment. It blocks me from the truth. It blocks me from you and it blocks me from God. And once I start peeling this stuff away and finding out what I am not, right? I am not this monster. Like if I start to peel, that's just my ego's reaction to life. Once I start removing all that stuff, I get to those questions in step 6. Am I clinging to any of this stuff? And coming in, I'm not clinging to any of it because the bar is so disgustingly low. Like I'm a liar, a cheat, thief, all this stuff. You can have it because it's all causing me consequences. I have no problem getting on my knees in step 7. And I had a more profound surrender in step 7 than I did in step 3 coming in. But the truth is if you fast forward to 12 years sober, that's a different story because, today I have defects of character that oftentimes, if they're providing me a sense of safety and security, or if I perceive that they are, I'll cling to them for dear life until I'm again faced with a self-imposed crisis I can no longer postpone or evade, where, I have to go back to these prayers and this willingness till I'm suffering under the weight of my own choices, basically. And, but anyway, I have this experience coming in step 7 and I go out into the world and I attempt to sweep away the debris that had accumulated out of my efforts to live on self-will and run the show myself. And I absolutely love that the book does not mention alcohol because I don't need alcohol to hurt you. I absolutely don't. I need a lot of fear just to stay in a lot of self stepping on your toes, and that's it. But as I go out into the world and I admit my wrongs, I don't say I'm sorry because frankly nobody wanted to hear that anymore. I start saying I was wrong, and now that, I allow these people the opportunity to share with me how I hurt them. And I ask them what I can do to make whole what I have broken apart, and I follow that up with action. Something amazing starts happening within me, right? I start experiencing the promises that I thought would elude me forever. I start experiencing the freedom that you were talking about. I start experiencing joy. I start experiencing love, connection, power. I start experiencing God. Like I thought I had to seek God, and like we're presented with that later, that we do have to go seek God in other ways. But like the weird thing is like seeking God and all these outside stuff. Interestingly enough, I didn't need to do that when I first came in. All I had to do was peel away all the stuff that was blocking me from the power I already had access to. Right? That fundamental idea of God that was deep down within every man, woman, and child was working in my life. And by the time I get to step 12, I realize what this power and what these steps have done for me. Because when I get to this point where I'm listening to another woman's life story, when she shares with me these things, I get to use all of these vile, disgusting things that I thought I was going to take to my grave, these secrets that I thought I would die with, that I thought I could never be forgiven for and never be redeemed for. And now they are my greatest gifts and assets in Alcoholics Anonymous. Because when a woman sits in front of me and she tells me how she cheated on her husband or she abandoned her children or drank during her pregnancy, there's no judgment. There's just love and understanding. That ultimate language of the heart that me too, I understand. I've been there. I've done that in that, and that was love and that was God and that was power. And that was connection. That was the thing that I had been seeking my entire life. And I have this experience. And I start going out into this world and start living the life beyond my wildest dreams that you had been talking about. And coming in, I don't know what that means. I think it's all about the outside stuff. And that's funny too, because I didn't really have wild dreams. I reached a point where there were no dreams at all, like maybe get an SSI check or marry a rich guy, but or maybe try to stay out of prison. Like I don't have any dreams. But then they do start to switch to the material. I do think AA is promising me some outside stuff, which it's absolutely not. There's nowhere in the book that promises us that. But I will tell you this, when I started going to work and, I actually started, working and not embezzling from my employers or nodding out of my desk and coming in early and staying, and being a worker among worker, I was able to be employable. When I walked through the fear, because I came into school, to, AA, a high school dropout, and I walked through the fear of going back to school, and my career started to advance, or when I started to get bills in the mail and pay the money that I owed because it wasn't my money to begin with, I started to develop this thing called good credit. All this stuff you taught me how to do because I didn't even know how to live basic, life. I started to get some stuff. So now I have a mortgage, a roof, and a car and a career, but none of that's it. Like, that's not even the life beyond my wildest dreams that I'm talking about. And a lot of the gifts that I've received in my sobriety, in my recovery, they don't look like gifts on the outside, but they are the things that I hold most dear to my heart. Like when I got a phone call coming up on 8 years sober that my oldest sister was dead. I had this beautiful experience of being surrounded by the unconditional love of the fellowship and carried when I could not walk, and being at my parents' side. And in this moment where I'm given this gift of being able to be with my parents in the precise moment they see their daughter in the casket for the first time, right? And intuitively knowing how to handle a situation that not only would have baffled me, that would have crippled me, meaning running to my mother's side when she's doubled over in pain, like in the worst moment of her life up until that point, and being there to comfort her, and being there to show up and comfort my sister's children who no longer had a mother, and being lovingly guided by a power and an intuitive force within me to know where to be, what to say, what not to say. Like I was experiencing this power working in my life in the depths of my despair. And not only that, I had the last year and a half of my sister's life, a relationship that I had longed for my entire life that had been made whole by the immense process. I got to have the best friendship with my sister that we had ever had our entire lives because of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I get to carry that with me forever. That is a gift no one could ever take away from me. So if I lived to be 200 years old, I could never repay the debt I owe to this fellowship. And you know what's insane about this is I have this experience, right, where I know God exists. I absolutely know there's a power working in my life. I know these 12 steps work because I've lived through it. Because not once during that pain and what I experienced with my sister did I think about running or did I think about picking up a drink. But even knowing that this works and having that experience and knowing God exists, I start to get complacent and I start to separate again from this work and I get, start thinking I'm the power. And I start doing this thing called two-stepping because what happens is instead of being God reliant, life just starts going my way and I assume I'm relying on God. That's a question I actually have to ask myself today. Am I really trusting God or am I just, are things just going my way? Because this was going on for a few years. The career's going well, the living situation's going well, like, and I start doing this two-stepping thing where I admit I'm powerless over alcohol, and then I come to AA to sponsor or actually life coach a bunch of women because I wasn't even really sponsoring them. I didn't have anything to transmit. It was my opinions. It was my ideas. It wasn't love. It wasn't godly driven direction. And then all of a sudden the pandemic hits. And I'm forced to reckon with this truth that I had separated, like that I was blocked off from this power again, because once you take all these human powers that I have made my highest power again away from me, the relationship's tanking, I can't leave the house, everything's, the fellowship's not around me anymore. I am faced with this truth that I'm blocked off from God again. And I experience this moment where I know things are going to be bad, this moment of grace, where I know I have to pick up the phone and get help, or I'm going to walk out the door, I'm going to pick up a drink. And so I pick up that phone and I call another woman in AA and I ask her to take me through the 12 steps. I ask her for help. She takes me through the steps from the beginning like I'm an absolute newcomer, like I know nothing. And frankly, like that's where I want to stay. That's where I always want to be, in that place of being willing to learn and being willing to view this through new eyes. That's why I love the set aside prayer. Dear God, help me set aside everything I think I know about like all of this, because the second I think I know, that's where my problems start to happen again. And I have this new experience going through these 12 steps, and it is so deeply painful. I'm going to be honest. It was uncomfortable. It was embarrassing because it's one thing to come in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous with the inventory that's piled up of all the stuff I did when I was getting loaded, but this is stuff I did sober. Stone cold sober. And most of that 8-step list was people in AA. And it was not like, these weren't minor amends. Some of them were really big. I caused a lot of harm. A lot of harm. I got involved in a really toxic relationship that not only, that harmed, there was a lot of collateral damage around that. I caused a lot of harm in my home group because I became this tradition psycho where I was like memorizing the traditions just so I could argue more effectively in my home group. Like it was really, that's the energy I was bringing to Alcoholics Anonymous. So I had a lot of cleaning up to do. So it was painful and it was uncomfortable and it was embarrassing at times, and it was humbling, but it was also beautiful. And it was the most freeing thing I'd ever experienced because after every single one of those amends, no matter how awkward or painful or uncomfortable they may have been, I walked away freer and freer and freer with a deeper love for Alcoholics Anonymous than I had ever experienced before in my life. And thank God I have this experience because it taught me a couple things. It taught me that truth that I need to remain that forever student. I need to remain teachable for the rest of my life, but I also need to be practicing steps 10 and 11 one day at a time for the rest of my life. I need to incorporate this God thing into my life all day, every day, because you'll notice when I kind of breeze through my steps, those were, I didn't talk about steps 10 and 11, and there's a reason. They weren't really part of my program. Now, I had a basic idea of what they were. I had a sponsor who showed me, we read through the stuff in the book, and I had a 10-step buddy who I vented with. I several buddies. I'd vent. I'd always talk about my resentment. I'll call you when I'm mad and we'll vent. And there was no God in it. And I had a rudimentary prayer and meditative life. Pray in the morning, pray at night, but I wasn't really doing this seeking thing. I started a little at 4 years sober, reading other books and seeking to see where religious people were right, but I wasn't really digging into this whole thing. But after that experience at 8 years sober, I realized like how just if I'm not seeking God, I'm moving further away. There's just no standing still here. So I get deeper into steps, I'll talk about 11 first, but I'm not going to really get into it because I think that's like deeply personal to all of us. But I start seeking through other books, through other prayers, through other meditations. And that's what it tells us to do. It tells us the big book's just the beginning. And I always have to remember that. I have to be willing to look and with that open mind to set aside that contempt prior to investigation. And I start doing that. And but more importantly, I start practicing. And I'm going to say more importantly because I really this 10th step has completely changed my life. As imperfectly as I practice it, because all of these steps are perfect principles that I practice absolutely imperfectly. But once I started really incorporating this 10th step in my life, everything started to change. It was a game changer. And what does it say in our 10th step? It says this word continue over and over and over again. We continue to watch. What am I watching? My thoughts, my mind, the thing that always causes me all the chaos, the God of reason that I worshiped for so long that offers me solutions that are more like problems, that tells me I'm not good enough, that tells me I don't belong, and it tells me I need to be afraid of this. And as I watch that, I ask God to remove these things as they come up, when these things crop up, resentment, selfishness, dishonesty, fear. I ask God to remove them, I discuss them, I amend what I need to amend, and I resolutely turn my thoughts to others. And as I do this and I really start paying attention, my reactions to life start to change. My relationships start to get better. I become a more effective sponsor. I become a better friend, a better employee. Like it's benefiting every area of my life. And thank God I have this experience because a little over 2 years ago, I'm on the phone with my little brother who is an active alcoholic at the time. And, you know what it says in our book about an alcoholic and his cup is an unlovely creature. Well, that accurately describes my brother. He's difficult and angry at the world and everybody around it. And I'm having this ridiculous conversation with him. In full transparency, we were just gossiping about my youngest brother's marriage. We'd both decided about how he needed to fix his marriage, which is kind of insane since neither one of us have ever had a successful relationship in our entire lives. But we both knew what was best. And at some point in this conversation, my brother says to me, "Well, why don't you tell me what you really think of me?" And in that moment, I did something because that I had avoided doing for the last decade of my sobriety. Because you taught me some very important things about dealing with an alcoholic when chapter 7 is so beautifully laid out when it talks about never speaking down to anyone from a moral and spiritual hilltop. And how I was taught early on that I'm supposed to be I may be the only example of a big book that my brother ever gets to see. And that's how I was trying to live my life. But in that moment, my ego crap right in there. Or this stage character of Miss Alcoholics Anonymous pop right into the scene, was like, "Well, okay." He asked for it. Like he asked for the truth, and here it is. And what I say to my brother in this really kind and really condescending way is that it's time for him to start taking accountability for your problems and start talking down to him. I say, you need to stop blaming mom and dad. And he's furious. He's so angry. He screams at me and he says, I'll never effing speak to you again. And he hangs up the phone and he blocks my number. And the reason I bring up the 10 step and why I'm so grateful for it and why it's so important is that when I hung up the phone, my first thought was, I'm right and he's wrong. And that is the number one thing that will separate me from you today. I'm right and you're wrong. But when I'm practicing a 10 step and when I'm watching, I can see something deeper underneath that. There's something going on. There's a disturbance. I love my brother and I don't want this disconnect, but I don't want him angry with me. So I pray and I call my sponsor, and I was on the phone with this woman for an hour because I couldn't get to that truth. I was struggling to get to that truth, but we get there after an hour because that's what we're here to do, right? Get to the truth. And the truth was simply this. I was absolutely terrified that my baby brother was going to die, and I would have said or done anything to keep him here with me. And that was the truth. And so my sponsor tells me, you need to amend this. That's part of our 10 step. When we're wrong, we promptly admit it. It's not not eventually, not when we feel like it. And because he had me blocked, she had me write a letter to him after 3 days and put a stamp on it. And instead of a letter, I wrote a little note because I knew if I gave myself that full sheet of paper, my ego would creep in there. So I wrote him 3 sentences. Dear Benjamin, I was wrong to speak to you that way. You didn't deserve it. I love you very much. And 2 months later, my brother died as a direct result of this disease. And on the morning of his death, I was on the phone with his girlfriend for 2 hours because this is what we get to do here in Alcoholics Anonymous. We get to be of maximum service to God and the people around us in the depths of our grief, in the depths of our despair. We get to be present for that. And she shares with me the story of him getting that note and his reaction, which was simply, I'm going to make her sweat it out. But the gift I receive from you and from Alcoholics Anonymous, gift I don't think I ever could have received anywhere else, is that I knew in that moment that, like, up until he took that last breath, he knew that I loved him. He knew that. And I know that he loved me. And I don't walk around with the weight and the guilt of that last conversation. I don't have to carry that today because of you, because of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I get to do the things that we get to do. Like, I got to carry his ashes to the funeral, and I got to stand up and give a eulogy for my little brother. And I got to be present for my parents in the depths of their never-ending grief and despair. Like, I get to do these things and play the roles God assigns me today. So when I'm talking about the life beyond my wildest dreams, this is it. This is the life beyond my wildest dreams. These things that I've experienced in my sobriety and my recovery, I'm not a victim. Like, everybody's going to experience this. We're all going to experience pain and loss and death and grief. This is just the life experience. I come in and, like, life shows up. Life's here. I haven't been present for it, but these 12 steps are designed for living. They give me the ability to be present for things that happen, regardless of how painful or wonderful they really are. I get to be present for all of it. The joy, the sorrow, the laughter. I get to be here for all of it. I don't run anymore. I don't hide anymore. I don't drown myself in alcohol and anesthetize myself anymore. And that's the life beyond my wildest dreams. And there is so much joy. That's the truth. It's not all sadness. It's not all sorrow. I get to play these roles God assigns that I never thought possible, like being the daughter I know that God always intended me to be, like being a friend today and experiencing true love and connection for other people. I get to sponsor women today. I get to see women come in broken and have their lives transformed through this work and sit with them and watch their lives get rebuilt from the inside out. I get to see the beginning of a ripple effect that I'll never see the full extent of. I get to work with women who are just like me at 8 years sober, because this seems to be my niche lately, where women come to me and they're like on their way out the door, just like I was at 8 years sober. And I get to lovingly hold them by the hand and take them back through this work and watch their eyes light back up and watch them fall back in love with Alcoholics Anonymous. I get to be present for these miracles every single day. That's the life beyond my wildest dreams, right? I get to play all of these roles, and I get to be a mother today. My daughter's my best friend in the entire world. There's not a thing I don't know about that in my child. Not a thing. I mean, there's probably stuff I don't want to know, but I know it all. She trusts me more than any other human being on this planet, including the man who raised her, her father. He's a good man. He was a wonderful father. He was the better parent. And we have a beautiful relationship today. We have a blended family. I was at his wedding. I'm friends with his wife. We celebrate holidays together. I babysit their midlife crisis baby. This is all a direct result of the ninth step, like the amends process. That's Alcoholics Anonymous in action right there, right? But the reason she trusts me more than her father is because you taught me how to be a mother, because you teach me how to be present for her and not try to fix her. And I fall short with that too. Not gonna lie, that's why I'm also doing work in Al-Anon. But but you teach me how to love her for who she is and how she is and how to be present for her. And because of that, I am the safest person she knows. Again, if I live to be 200 years old, how do you repay a debt like that? Because she has every right to hate me, and she does not. You know, this is this is the life we're given here in Alcoholics Anonymous. And like I said, none of us are promised a free ride here. None of us are promised an easy ride here. That's not what this is about. The book doesn't say about, anything about avoiding trouble. In fact, it refers to the trials and low spots that are certain. What it promises us is the ability to walk through anything with a loving power. Right. And my life may never look perfect on the outside. In fact, I have a son I haven't seen in 18 years now. His birthday was just 2 days ago. And I used to say to people that I lost custody of my son when he was 6 years old, but that's a lie. I abandoned my child. And prior to abandoning him, I wreaked so much havoc on his life and the lives of every single person around him. I caused so much suffering. And at a couple years sober, I made all the approaches, the amends approaches to his parents, his father, his stepmother. He wrote letters, did all that. Nobody responded. And at a couple years sober, I was starting to get angry that I didn't think AA was working. Right. This is where my mind starts to go, because there's this story in the big book. If you haven't read it yet, there's this farmer, who comes up out of a cellar after a tornado, and the tornado has destroyed everything. And he looks around, and he says, "Oh, I don't see the problem. The wind stopped blowing." This is me at a couple years sober. I have like almost destroyed every person's life involved with my son. And I got 2 years sober, and I'm like, well, what's the problem? Why won't they talk to me? Why won't they respond to my amends letters? And I don't get it. So I do this thing that I used to do, and that was to run around to everybody in the rooms and ask for suggestions, right? Waiting to hear the suggestion that I agreed with and then running with that. And I had a lot of well-meaning people in and out of the rooms tell me, get a lawyer, do this, you never fully lost rights. And this is how I know that there's a power working in my life and it isn't me. Because at some point I have this intuitive thought that, maybe you don't get to do what you want to do anymore. Maybe this isn't about you. So instead of doing what I wanted to do, I did what the big book suggests we do. And that's ask God when we're not, facing indecision. I ask God for an intuitive thought or decision. Full disclosure, I'm not great at the whole we relax and take it easy part. But I start asking. In fact, I start begging. Like, God, show me what to do, because I love my son. And I miss my son, and I want to make this whole, and I don't know how. And I don't even know what he looks like. Can you show me what I need to do here? What do I need to do to make this okay? And then one night I typed his name into Instagram, and there was my boy, like beautiful and loved. And like in this moment, I experienced this peace. And the only way I describe it is that peace that passes all understanding, right? This peace that comes into my heart, and this knowing that the restoration of this relationship will happen on God's time and not on mine. And what I know today are a couple things where, after digging a little deeper, is I know that the restoration may never look the way I want it to, but God will use it for something bigger. And I also know that sometimes the best thing to do is nothing, right? The best thing to do is nothing. Like, I've done everything I can. I send a letter and a card and money every single month, and I will continue to do that if I die, until I die. Even if he doesn't respond, I send it with love, hope, and no expectation. I ask for nothing in return, right? And the amazing part of that is, even when there is silence on the other end, there's freedom within me. And that is not something I was ever expecting. See, I come into Alcoholics Anonymous expecting to have the world look the way Sarah once said in order for me to be okay on the inside, right? I have to have all my ducks in a row. I have to have everything back. And our book says, it's possible that we're not going to get everything back. Not everything will be made whole, but we are made whole through this work. My favorite line in the big book, hands down, is that we have to burn the idea into the consciousness of every person that we get well, regardless of anyone. All we have to do is trust God and clean house. That has been my experience. Because when I'm well in here, when I'm well from the inside out, the outside doesn't have to be perfect, and I somehow can find peace in my heart. And when I'm well from the inside out, I don't need alcohol to fix me anymore. And this freedom and this gift I've experienced is available to all of us. We just have to work for it. I love you guys. That's all I have.
Wow.
Wow, that was pretty darn amazing. I've got to tell you, and where did you go? There you are. And I missed part of your story. I had a power and a Wi-Fi issue over here. I got booted out of oh my God. And I hope the recording is here. I really do. I think part of it's recording on Derek's computer. I don't know. We'll figure it out. That was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. Loretta, I hope you're here.